One of the most frequent conversations I'm having in my agency group and with my private coaching clients is around talent, or quite frankly, the lack of talent right now. And therefore, there is a need for us to find more creative ways of finding good people. And of course, one of those ways is finding great freelancers. So that's the topic for today's podcast. And I am really excited to be joined by Shahar Erez, who is the co-founder and CEO of Stoke, an on-demand talent platform empowering companies to adopt a hybrid workforce model that scales as quickly and efficiently as they needed. Now, in 2021, Stoke was acquired by Fiverr for $110 million, just 15 months after coming out of stealth mode. So that is super impressive. And I'm really interested to dig into that a little bit later. I'm Rob DaCosta, and this is the Agency Accelerator podcast. As someone who has stood in your shoes, having started, grown and sold my own agency, I know just how it feels during the ups and the downs of agency life. So this podcast aims to ease your journey just a little by sharing mine and my guests' experiences and advice as you navigate your way to growing a profitable, sustainable and enjoyable business. Welcome to the show, Shahar. I'd love to hear your view on the state of the market for good creative talent right now in 2022.
First of all, thanks for having me, Rob. It's great to be here. I think the state of talent, when we founded the company back in 2019, we did the research in 2018. It was already evident that there's a significant shift happening in the market, and we're transitioning from kind of searching for conceptually employees or a long-term engagement to more skill-based engagement. And we kind of got into kind of the early 2020 with kind of a perfect storm. There were multiple forces shaping what we're now seeing in the talent market. First and foremost, companies and agencies need to adapt faster. The type of skills that companies and agencies need is constantly changing. So if you go back, marketing agencies, media agencies 15 years ago were looking for online marketing was a function. No one's looking for online marketing anymore, right? Online marketing is like 15, 20 different people, because we're almost in an era of sub-residencies, right? Everyone is a specialist in LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram or TikTok, it's like, or videographer or content, right? It's like there's so many different skills that you don't want one-stop shop, one person that does everything and mediocre at everything. You want great people at each of these. So that was a significant trend. Number two, again, pace of change. And on the other end, on the talent side, if you will, first and foremost, people didn't want full-time, long-term engagement anymore. So in a research in 2018, we already saw that 45% of Gen Z, for those who don't know, born 95 to 2005, 45% of them in the United States, high schoolers back then, said they will never take a traditional job. They want flexibility. They want a different social contract. Employee tenure has dropped to an all-time low, below 2 years on average, sticking to a single company. And third, people, again, wanted this flexibility and remote work, even before COVID, right? We started seeing this trend of digital nomads before COVID. Obviously, COVID has accelerated, but it happened before. And so I think we're kind of in this significant workforce revolution, probably the greatest that we've seen since the Industrial Revolution over 100 years ago, in which employment is skill-based, shorter term, project-based, and that should lead to a lot of significant decisions on how you build an organizational DNA that can cope with these changes. And so, generally speaking, yes, there's lack of talent, but not really as bad as most think about it. I just think that most people are still trying to find talent the way we thought of talent 5 years ago, and not how talent is evolved to become.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good observation. Do you see this trend? I guess the answer is probably yes to this, but do you see this trend continuing in the next few years?
So forecasts are, again, pre-COVID, that by 2030, 60% of workforce will be freelancers. There's researchers out there that forecasted this before. The trend has been continuing for the past 20 years. So it's not just the last 2-3 years. It's been going on. By the way, if you think about it, this is how people used to work Before 100 years, people worked. If you showed up for work, you got paid the same day. If you didn't show up to work, you didn't get paid. And somewhere in the 1920s, around the Great Recession, um, countries have realized that if there is a recession or anything, they can't support their citizens, so they legislated Social Security and things like that to be able to pay. And then what we now call employment has emerged. Now we're back in a world where people want to get paid for what they know. People want to work remotely. People want to have multiple employers. Um, More work can be done remotely, so you don't have to show up to a specific location. I can work for a company that's a block away and then provide consulting services to a company in the United States at night, and tomorrow morning spend some time with a different company. So this diversification is happening. Is it going to continue? Yes. I think one of the biggest challenges, and by the way, we see it with small companies, agencies are kind of built on that model, right? You have a project, you need people. You don't have a project, you don't want to pay salaries because it's like you're margin based business. I think the biggest gap right now is how companies are able to evolve, because the largest employer obviously are corporates, and they're still having a hard time going through this shift. Because I'm 75 born, I'm 46 years old, and I got into the industry in 2001, and I was trained throughout my career how to hire full-time employees. This is what I was trained to do: how to interview them, how to qualify them, how to do performance reviews, how to give them merit increases. This is what I knew. Now when someone tells me, well, start working with freelancers, it's like, how? Where do I find them? How do I interview them? How do I know they're great? How do I know they're going to stick around? So I think there's a mental shift. It's a lot easier for millennials and Gen Zs. People like us, it's a little harder, I guess.
Yeah, I'm a lot older than you. I'm a bit just about a baby boomer, I think, or on the cusp of X Gen and baby boomer. I think it's a really good shout to say that perhaps there isn't a lack of talent; it's the way people are recruiting. I think that's a really good observation. So tell me, how should people be recruiting now? Given that they're telling me, "Hey, Rob, we're really struggling to find good people," what should I be telling them?
Um, well, I think there's a couple elements to that equation. First of all, the biggest barrier that we're seeing in 90% of companies that we interact with, first and foremost, is mindset. Open up to that. And by the way, most people, when we talk to them, are kind of say, well, I'm looking for a full-time employee. Well, if you find a freelancer, that's okay as well. It's like, no, it's like you got to treat it as a strategic element of the company to start building a flexible backbone and what we call a talent cloud. Start pulling in resources, constantly be recruiting. When I was when you're in a growth stage company and there's enough cash in the bank, there's this element: always be recruiting for funds, always be recruiting for great people, always have open headcount, because you don't know when you're gonna need that person. Is going to be too late. It's going to take you 6 to 9 months. So always be recruiting. Always build out your freelancer database, um, and change the mindset when you're onboarding a freelancer. When you're opening up to that idea, understand that freelancing is like going out on a date, right? When you're going out on a date, you're not committing to marrying anyone or having kids together. You're kind of saying, let's figure out if we can survive this dinner, grab a drink, and if we like it, we'll have another date, and then another date, and then maybe at some point we'll move in together. When most of us are under the mentality when we hire full-time employees that after 4 dates we got to get married, right? It's either we get married or we separate. And in freelancing, and the companies that are doing it well really have an open mind that says, if I need something done, I'll find a freelancer. Um, if it's a short-term project or maybe it's a long-term opportunity, but I'll treat it as a short-term thing. I'll give them a small task to do. I'll see how they work. I'll see how my communication with them works. If it works well, we'll continue, and I'll have more jobs for them over time. And if it doesn't, no hard feelings. You don't have to fire them. You don't have to go through HR. It's like, okay, no new project for you. It's all good. It's all within expectation. Um, One of the companies that does this very well, by the way, is Automatic, the company that developed WordPress. It's public on their website how the process works. So if you want to work with WordPress, like, you're going to have an online interview. By the way, now they do it through chat, which I find super challenging. I don't know how they interview over chat, but they do. Um, and if you go through that, you'll get a 2-week project. During the 2-week project, small project, you're going to get paid for it. It's not going to get paid for the project. At the end of the project, the people who worked with you, we're going to meet together and say, did we like working with him? What's his professionalism level? Do we think he can be successful? If the answer is yes, you're going to get a 2 months project. Same thing. And at the end of it, okay, now you become a regular contractor for the company. Now, every company can have a different process, but the mindset is more of an on job qualification. We're not going through months and months of interviews, because interviews are not great indicators. By the way, there's stats, and I'm not sure I can back those up, but there are stats out there that say that 30% of employees quit within their first 3 months or something of that sort, which is insane. The amount of money and time you spend on interviewing someone, and then you find someone that either didn't work for you or you didn't want them to work for you anymore. It's so costly. Use that energy. Just get people on the job. Let them do some work, figure out how it works, and then start running with them. I would add to that, what we are seeing with freelancers, and companies are adopting this. Freelancers are an acceleration to how the company operates, and people don't think about it often the right way. Freelancers are working for, I don't know. We didn't discuss your career, Rob. I worked for 6 different companies throughout my career. That's my 20 years, 6 companies, give or take. Freelancers work for 5 companies a year, sometimes 2, sometimes 3. So when they're coming to you, they have a significant database of knowledge. They've seen how companies work. They know how to hit the ground running. They know how to interact within your company. Again, some better than others. They're not all the same. And that helps the company significantly learn what worked well at other companies, what failed at other companies. So you're literally pumping up knowledge and capabilities into your organization when you adopt that approach.
Yeah, that's so good. I acknowledge with my hands in the air that I might need to change my mindset a bit about this. So my next questions might be a bit of old paradigm
No worries.
thinking. But so first of all, how do you stay profitable when you're hiring freelancers, which potentially cost more than the equivalent full-time person? Maybe that's the wrong thinking.
I don't know if it's the wrong thinking. When you're looking at the biggest motivation to hire freelancers, money saving is number 5 on the list. It's faster time to market, operating at full capacity, flexibility in the organization. There's a lot of different reasons. Financials are might be a reason, but it's not the leading one. Generally speaking, I am almost impartial about the cost of freelancers. Generally speaking, some of them will be more expensive, some of them will cost less. But the thing is, if you right size the project to your budget, you're able to do that with freelancers, which you can't with employees. So the way I started with Stoke, we didn't cover it, but I was working for the company. I was acting CMO for a company, and I took over the team. I think there were 10 people in marketing back then, and marketing was, I'd give it a B minus back then. The execution level. And I want to do some things, and I found it's like, this is the team I have. It's like taking a football team and saying, okay, we got to win. It's like, these are the 11 players you have on the field. It's like, this is what you got to do with. And I realized, like, there's no way to make any significant change. So I think it was week 1 or 2 on the job, I laid off half the team. I fired half the team. And with it, I had, I think it was $700,000 now made available because I didn't have a headcount anymore. And I deployed all the dollars into freelancers. And within 3 months, I tripled all of previous year's leads. And it's not because I'm a great marketeer. That wasn't the case. But I was able to take those $700,000 and get, an expert SEM person for 2 days a week, an SEO person for 1 day a week, someone to clean up our email template, someone to clean up our Salesforce, designers to content writers. Like, I got people in right sized to what I needed. I don't need a full-time SEO expert. I didn't have that much to do, but I wanted someone to do it right. 1 day a week was good enough for me. And so from a budgetary perspective, it actually worked a lot better for the type of business I ran. Now, for agencies, which I know are some of the subscribers on this, I think for agencies, it's a lot more efficient, because at the end of it, you're running project-based. Uh, um, Everything is project-based, so you can keep your margins. So you have a margin for a project, you have a target margin, you know how much you want to put into a project, and you can actually track that constantly. If you have an employment line item, doesn't matter if you have less or more projects, you're still spending the same amount.
Yeah, so interesting. So I think one of the mistakes in terms of a mindset and an approach that I'm making and some of my audience makes is that they are trying to hire a full-time role. They can't find a full-time person, so they then look to a freelancer. What they really need to do is start looking at the projects and the specific things that they have and hire to fill those projects. I guess that's the big
Correct.
mindset shift.
And what happens over time, it's not what happens, it doesn't happen overnight, is that at some point you're going to have a database of, in agencies land, SEO people, and might be video artists and photographers. And you have this database. And then when a project comes, you can pull out of the database who's available now and kind of right size them to the project. And then it helps you keep that track. What we're seeing, one of the mistakes is people are kind of saying, oh, when I have a need, I'll go find someone. Guess what? When you have a need, doesn't mean they're available.
Right. Yeah.
So you constantly need to take care of this. Um, it's like having a podcast and only airing when you have something important to say. And so when you have something important to say, no one's going to come listen to your podcast because there's no continuity.
Yeah, absolutely. Good comparison. What about a cultural thing? Because sometimes people have struggled. And by the way, I sound quite negative, but I'm not about freelancers. I'm just kind of posing these challenging questions, I
No,
suppose. Um, what about cultural fit? Because sometimes people struggle with freelancers because they've got their own agendas, their own visions for their own freelance business. Obviously, when you hire an employee, you're looking for someone who's going to be a good cultural fit and hopefully grow with the business. How do you manage those two things?
So I think cultural fit is true in both employment and freelancing. Obviously, there's a lot of shades of gray of freelancing. So I have freelancers here in my company, by the way. We're a 30 people company. We have almost 40 freelancers we work with. Okay. Some of them are showing up at the office 3 times a week. Some of them I've never seen. Some of them are here for a 2 week project. Some of them we worked with for the past 6 or 9 months, right? And so it's not one size fits all. You got to fit it to what you need. So if it's someone that you want in the office, then cultural fit is super important. If it's someone that's an expert in, I'll give you an example. Someone's doing podcasts, right? It's like I'm recording a podcast for someone that's editing. I actually have an agency that's working with us and helping us schedule these podcasts, as an example. I don't need a cultural fit with them, right? It's like it's a pure business relationship. They're not in the office. They're not showing up at the all hands. I'm not doing performance reviews with them. It's like, okay, keep it loosely coupled. If it's someone that's part of the team, then it needs to be part of the team. It needs to help drive efficiency. It needs to still be fun to work with them. All of these things. But again, it's on the job evaluation. I think it's very difficult. People have we give too much credit to an interview process of full time employees. When you meet someone for 4 sessions, 45 minutes each, do you actually think you know how they're going to be in the day to day work when shit hits the fan, when things go south? You don't know.
No.
It's the same thing. Freelancers actually give you that opportunity to learn through the job. And the second thing I will tell you, I have a friend who told me once, when I hire an employee, they're committed to the company and they're part of who we are, and so I can trust them. So you got it backwards. A freelancer will always show up and work hard because they know if they don't, they're gone the next week. They always have something to prove. I've worked with corporates and mid-sized companies. There are so many people that are complacent because, hey, I'm here. I'm okay. I'm kind of in the mid-range of execution. There's no real reason for me to work super hard. No one's going to fire me. Freelancers are constantly pushing towards execution. There's endless researches that show that they are more up to date in skills and higher and more engaged in execution.
Yeah, that's so true. And yeah, absolutely agree. So, talking of sort of managing freelancers, and I think you've touched upon this a bit already, but how should you manage if you've got a freelancer that's doing 2 days a week for you on an ongoing basis? How do you manage them differently or the same as an equivalent full time employee?
So there's a few different elements. First and foremost, there's where do you find them? how do you onboard them? What's onboarding a freelancer means? You need them to sign legal documents. You want to make sure you own IP at the end of the engagement. You want to make sure you're compliant with GDPR so that you can't access things they shouldn't. I mean, there's bureaucracy that needs to be handled, right? Then there needs to be how do you track budgets and payments? So employees get paid on the same day every month or twice a month, depends on how the company operates. And usually managers don't care about it, not don't care in the men, they don't care. It's like they don't have to worry about it. It just happens. They get their paycheck. Freelancers, contractors, someone needs to make sure they got paid because they're sending an invoice. Finance needs to process it. And we all have been through the process where all of a sudden a freelancer says, I didn't get paid this month. And all of a sudden the invoice is stuck somewhere and someone's trying to stall the payment to, I'll pay you net 30 or net 60. It's like all these. So there's something there in the process. You want to track your own budget because usually you get a freelance budget. You have budget, you can do more. You don't have budget, you have less. So tracking that. And then there's everything to do with relationship with the freelancer around compliance. And because there's more and more legislation in the United States, there's AB5 in the UK now, there's IR35 in Australia. There's a legislation like how do you distinguish between an employee and a contractor or a freelancer so you don't end up getting sued for taxes or whatnot. So that's important. And then beyond that, you treat them just like anyone else. I mean, they can join your team meetings. You can give them feedback. You don't give them reviews. You don't force them into a schedule because again, this falls into compliance. But we work with our contractors, freelancers, just as we do with anyone else. Again, depends on the job they do.
And I guess fairly broad question, really. Do you recommend paying freelancers based on a project or paying them on day rates or hourly rates or?
So generally speaking, I'm a very big fan of paying for delivery. I think it's the clearest. But I do recognize it's not always an option, right? So someone gave me, we have these debates here as well. Should we force the market into project-based because project-based is a lot clearer? And I was like, let's assume, Rob, you're hiring me as a freelance consultant on how to grow, the list of audience that you have. What are you going to pay me by? The amount of advice that I give you? It's very, not everything can fall into this project model. So some things are still kind of daily rate, hourly rate. But again, I think this is where part of building a flexible workforce means you can hire people based on the need and decide on payment terms based on the project.
Yeah. I had a story of a client who hired a copywriter, gave them a very clear brief. The copywriter was charging by the day. They came back at the end and delivered the work and said, look, I've gone way over the days that you paid me, but I'm not going to charge you. The client read the copy and it was terrible. And so there was a really different kind of, view of the world from both sides. So,
By the way, that's a great comment because if it's the first time you're working with a freelancer and you don't know their style, make sure you break the project into smaller tasks and milestones. I want to see a draft after 2 days just to get a sense of direction. You're going to add it or create some style guides or icons for me. I want to get like first three after. Make sure that in the relationship, you're kind of structuring it to the smallest size of project you can to start getting a sense, is this heading in the right direction? Because the last thing you want to deal with is frustration on both sides. Like, this is what I understood. This is what you said. Once there's trust, then everything is okay because you can trust them. But up until that point, make sure you break it down to the smallest milestone you can to gain that confidence. It's a great comment.
Yeah, good advice. So one more question before we talk a bit more about Stoke. So if I'm listening to this podcast and I'm nodding my head, agreeing with everything that you're saying, and I'm thinking I've tried all the normal channels to find this freelancer pool, but I'm really struggling because they're in demand at the moment. What advice would you have about that?
So first of all, I doubt anybody tried all because there's about 1,000 marketplaces out there. So it's pretty much impossible. When we built Stoke, we didn't build it with kind of saying, hey, we're going to build our talent pool and we're going to have a better talent pool than everyone's saying the same thing. We built Stoke as a platform for companies to manage, first and foremost, the freelancers that they find and manage. 90% of freelancers within companies were joined the company through word of mouth and not through any platform. And so we said, first, we'll help you get all these people that came in through word of mouth and build this talent cloud. And then when you're searching for talent, we're not going to build our own talent pool. We're actually going to integrate with multiple marketplaces. So you don't have to care if that talent was registered on platform A, B, or C. All you need to care is that you'll get the right talent to fit your need. The most important advice is, if it's a small project, take a risk. If it's a small project, a few $100s. When I started the company and I need content writers, I put posts for $150 for a $500 blog, 500 word blog post, give it to 3 different freelancers, saw 3 different styles, picked the one that I want, and yes, I ended up spending $300 on people that I never worked with. Was worth it to find the person that I want. It's $150. If you're going after an engineering project that you're going to spend $100,000 on, obviously spend some more time talking to them, interviewing them. Again, spend the time to understand how you want to hire them and how you want to work with them. The most important thing is start building your pool of talent and managing that pool of talent more than anything else.
Yeah. Okay. Good advice. So let's talk a little bit about Stoke Talent. So I am interested to know, well, obviously share with the listeners about what Stoke does, but also I'm interested to learn more about the recent acquisition by Fiverr. And was that always in your plan when you started the business?
No, obviously not. I never thought I'm going to sell the company so quickly. We just raised our A round 3 or 4 months before we got acquired, so obviously that wasn't the plan. So we built Stoke with the understanding that in order for the gig economy to become mainstream, corporates will need to adopt it. And for companies to adopt it, we'll need to build a platform that's not behaving like a standard marketplace. When you swipe your credit card and someone does your kid's birthday video, like, Upwork and people per hour and Fiverr. And it's like, how do you build a platform that's ready for serious use, if you will? And that's what we started building with Stoke. It's really about meeting the company's needs. It's like teams and departments and approval processes and budget management and building your own personal talent cloud and internal reviews, things that don't go outside, and processing payments in a different manner. It's really fitting it to how companies think. How do you manage multiple projects? We have companies managing their clients within Stoke. It's really how to fit it into that paradigm. How to control expenses, because it's difficult to control expenses with freelancers. You almost need a full-time finance person. We have an agency just now that onboarded 2 months ago and saved $8,500 a month because they had a full-time person just tracking all the various invoices from the 50 freelancers they work with. So that's that. I started the company and I thought it's going to be a long journey because the market was very early days. I mean, most companies were still aren't looking for a freelance management system. COVID obviously has accelerated things. And I met the Fiverr team multiple times. They're down the street from where our office was. And I consulted them a few times, the industry, where things are heading towards and so forth. And last August, out of the blue, they called us up and said, hey, we think that the market is maturing in the direction you guys have been talking about. Businesses will start adopting. Future of work is more reliant on freelancers. We want to accelerate our penetration into the market. What do you think about us acquiring you? So, my first reaction was, we just raised $15 million. We have enough money in the bank. We're not in a hurry to sell. But Fiverr is a great company. Let's have a conversation. And B, if we can work out what the day after looks like and we can work out commercials, then I'm obligated to building a successful business. And so,
Wow. Well,
identity.
congratulations.
Thank you.
What's in the future? Do you know what the future plans are for Stoke and how Fiverr might use you?
So obviously Fiverr is super successful. I'm still at awe at all the achievements this company has been able to create and their market penetration and the volume that we're seeing and the type of companies that are using them. But company is generally focused on Fiverr generally focused on small medium businesses, solopreneurs. That's been the focus. Our focus is more B2B, up the stack. Companies with hundreds of employees, a few thousand employees, and so obviously there's a lot of synergies there. Fiverr has a great talent pool. We have an application for corporates, and now as we're starting to build this B2B business, obviously we have a lot of strong assets that will allow us to go together. Right now, we're keeping Stoke as a standalone company within Fiverr, so we're Fiverr owned, but we are maintaining our plans for 2022 while starting to build these synergies with the Fiverr marketplace.
Yeah, exciting times, and what, like you say, what a great fit between the two businesses. I've used Fiverr many times for doing various things along the way, and found the good, the bad, and the ugly from hiring people on there. So I think with Fiverr, if ever there was that adage, you get what you pay for, is very true on there. So
Exactly, it's a very clear project based delivery, 100%. I think Fiverr represents very well how to do this in project based. I think when you're getting into longer term engagement, it becomes a little more complicated.
yeah. Well, listen, we could talk for ages about this. It's such an interesting and important topic. In fact, I'm just sitting here thinking I need to share this with my private clients, this interview, because so many of them, I think always in the business world, or specifically in the agency world, the top two conversations are around new business and talent. And I think in the last 18 months, they've switched to be talent first, business second. So it's such an
I can tell
important topic.
we have a large agency or a mid-sized agency in Germany that completely flipped their business model since starting work with us. I think it was last November, October 2020. Um, COVID led agencies into kind of, okay, what do we do now? How do the financials? How do we run the business? And they start working more with freelancers, relying on us. And they kind of, the way they said, Stoke has become our secret weapon because now we're far more efficient. We're right sizing to project. Our margins have improved. Our operational efficiency is improved. So, but it requires a decision. We're really going to go after this thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. Well, listen, let me ask you the same question I ask all my guests, which is, if you could go back in time and give your younger self just starting out in business a piece of advice, what would it be?
I'd say two things. Number one is always be networking. I think one of the things that I didn't do well as a younger self was not really invest in connecting and opening. And when I say networking, it's not going out for cocktails and meetups only for that. It's really about networking to learn how other businesses operate, learn how other people have succeeded and failed, and learning through that. Um, and the second, and it's probably related, um, is how to, I'm going to say personal brand, although I think we're overly used the term personal brand these days. It's not about being vocal and putting yourself out there, but investing in who you are, what it is you know how to do, where you want to place yourself. I think is super important. But by far, open up, meet up with people, take risks meeting up with people. By the way, that's one of my biggest learnings at Stoke. I was complete opposite than how I behaved, 10 years before that. Every meeting that someone wanted I took every meeting I got, every meeting with any person. And 80% of them were successful in learning, not successful in closing a business. And 20% were a waste of time, but you got to embrace that waste of time as well. Because look at the
You
bigger.
learn something there, don't you? So about that. I mean, that's why I love doing this podcast, because I learn from people like you every single day, which is fantastic. And it just helps me change my mindset and my view of the world, which in turn helps me help my clients. So if people wanted to find out more about you and about Stoke, where would be the best place for them to go?
We're at stoketalent.com. So you're more than happy to check us out. Happy to jump on a call and run a demo or whatnot. I'm mostly on LinkedIn, Shahar Erez. Feel free to reach out if I can help with anything, provide any advice, by all means.
Fantastic. Well, I will share both of those links in the show notes. And congratulations again on the sale. And thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your wisdom with the audience.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Rob.